Hi, and welcome to episode 134 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Tarek.
And I'm Marco, and thanks for joining us on the podcast, where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing journeys, how they got into the industry, and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. This is one of a special series of episodes where we're speaking to people behind the scenes in the publishing industry to try and find out how to make that book that you've written turn into first a real book and even possibly a film afterwards. So we've spoken to agents, editors and Hollywood managers to find out what journey your book takes and what these people are looking for. And today's episode is another great episode with a US literary agent.
Yeah, we're continuing the agent run right now with Mr. Eric Smith, who is a fantastic US agent. He works with people like Chen, like Alison, Stine, and he's actually an author himself, which is great because it means he's kind of seen both sides of the table. He's worked as an agent looking after writers, and he's a writer himself who's went on that journey.
Yeah, so he knows what
he
knows what it's like to be in those query trenches,
Yeah.
which can be a bit of a scary and at times depressing place as well.
Yeah.
So he gives us some really good advice, and he's someone also that's really lively on Twitter and giving out lots of advice on that, and we speak to him about that as well. So it's a really great episode, so we hope you enjoy it. We'll get straight to it now.
On with the podcast.
I suppose the question to start with yourself is, I know you write and you're an agent as well, but looking at the agency side of things first, how did you become a literary agent?
Yeah. So originally I was trying to become an editor. It's funny, I feel like I have a lot of agent friends who, when you ask them, how'd you become a literary agent, there's some sort of roundabout story that they end up telling everybody. But I've been working at a publishing house for a number of years, handling digital marketing and video production and just about everything you could imagine. And I was trying to work my way into an editorial gig. It wasn't quite happening. So I started applying for lots of editor positions. And then one day, this agency who I'd worked with quite a bit at the publishing house, because we'd worked on some of their titles, had a job opening open. And I very professionally DM'd the people at the agency and was like, hey, we might know each other. Is this a thing I could apply for? And they were very kind, and they let me interview for it and gave me a shot. So I've been an agent for about 7 years now. But I came from a publishing background where I'd been in a publishing house for 6 years. I'd written 2 books that had been published already. So kind of came equipped with different skills that some agents don't usually have.
And when you're first getting into that world, I suppose, and I suppose you, like you say, you've come into it from a slightly different world, but you know, we all hear the stories about how many queries an agent gets a week and all of this sort of stuff. How do you even begin trying to select what to progress and things like that?
Yeah, it's difficult, like you hear the stories of agents getting just inundated with query letters, and it's true. I probably get a couple dozen a day, and sometimes significantly more depending on an event that might be happening. But usually you can get through them pretty quickly, not because the stories don't sound good, not because the writers, aren't writing anything good, but because I get a lot of pitches for stuff that's not quite for me, like I don't work on picture books. I get a lot of picture book queries. I don't work on memoirs that aren't in essay format. And I get lots of just very traditional, like straight storytelling memoirs. And that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with sending a query letter like that when maybe you're not quite sure what the agent works on. But that means I get through them a little bit faster. I'd say maybe like 60% of the queries that I get like feel like they're made for me and that I should be reading these kind of books. So I kind of sort them all out, and I take the time every morning to sort out the pitches that feel like they're right for me, so that when I have a day where I'm not, I guess, too overwhelmed by other things at work, like working on contracts or working on current client books, that I can sit down and give them all the attention that they deserve. I write too, so I totally understand how difficult it is to pitch your stuff out there. So I make sure they all get my attention.
And when you've like knocked out that 40% that's not really applicable to you, and you're left with that pile of stuff that is in your wheelhouse, What's your first step then? I mean, obviously everyone knows that you go by you got the query letter and you got the sample chapters, etc. So what do you do? What's your process?
I look at the story. Does it sound like an interesting story? Does it sound like something that's wildly unique? If it's a nonfiction project, I take a look at the concept. Like, is this something that I've seen before? Is it already out there in the market? When it's also nonfiction, I look at the platform. Like, is this the person that should be writing this book? Are they the expert on their topic? If they're not, usually it's something that's not right for me. And when the story feels like it's right for me, that's when I keep going. And I read the 10 sample pages. Usually those sample pages, that's just to give me a sense as to what the writer's voice is like and if they can actually write. And then I request more.
And we often hear the importance of the query letter itself before you even get to the pages. I mean, what would you say are the do's and don'ts on a query letter?
Yeah, and just to, like, I don't know, maybe make any listeners relax here, when it comes to that query letter. Like, I request a lot of books that have had bad query letters, like, and have broken rules, because the story sounds good, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world if you mess up on a little thing here and there. Like, agents aren't monsters that are just furiously deleting like little hiccups there. Like you'll be okay. And I guess like the big do's and don'ts there. Like, first and foremost, just look at the submission guidelines to make sure you know what you're doing. Some agents don't like attachments, and that's a thing that might get you deleted. Like, if you send an attachment, they don't want attachments. Because maybe they have an assistant that's doing it for them, or maybe they just don't trust attachments. Like, I don't. I get so much spam. I get so many phone calls from people asking me to extend my car warranty. Like, like, you have to be careful. So that might be bad. So yeah, read the submission guidelines. Make sure you know what it is they want. Definite do's in my book are try to have a hook when you're opening your query letter. That little opening line that lets us know, like, here's the title, here's the genre, here's the category, here's the word count, here's some comp titles, and here's the one line that's going to sell you on what my book is about. I feel like I see this with every client that I sign, where they say something like a good example. I work with this one writer, Alison Stine, and her book, Road Out of Winter, it won the Philip K. Dick Award last year, or 2 years ago, last year. And I remember her opening hook was, my novel, Road Out of Winter, is perfect for fans of Station 11, The Girls, and California, and it's about a female marijuana farmer trying to escape climate change in Appalachia. And right away, like, that hook told me everything I need to know about that book. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, end of the world, climate change. It's going to be a feminist book. It's going to be lyrical and literary, like these books that this author mentioned. I'm going to request that. And like, I knew I was going to request it just from that hook before I even got to the pages. So hooks are important if you can have one. The book section, which is just the jacket copy that you would have on your book. It's the 2 or 3 paragraphs that you see on the back of every book in your personal library that tells you what the story's about, right? It tells you who the character is, tells you what the stakes are, like, gets you firmly grounded in the story without ruining it for the person reading the jacket copy. And then the about section, who you are. Like, I know with fiction, like, that stuff tends to not matter. People say it doesn't matter, but I think it does, because when you're working with someone as an agent, the relationship, it might be business, but it also ends up getting very personal. Like, I want to work with people that are cool people, and that like I'm going to want to talk to every week for years because we're getting this book put together. So say something about yourself, even if you have nothing published yet. Like, when I'm not busy writing, I'm busy with my kids, and I like going fishing, or I like going for walks, whatever it happens to be. And when it's nonfiction, that little section about yourself, tell us why you're the person to write the book. Like, I have written articles and essays for yada, 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 yada. And that's what's going to grab us. In terms of don'ts, don't belittle your genre. I see that a lot. Like, oh, I'm writing a fantasy novel. Nothing has ever been written like this before. Let me explain to you. Like, I hate that. If you're writing nonfiction, don't send me a link to your Wikipedia page. Like, that's not gonna impress me. Like, I don't. Anyone can have a Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like, I want to feel like I'm gonna get to know a person. I don't want to work with someone who's just like, here's my Wikipedia. I'm a big deal. Like, that's not interesting to me. Um, and yeah, I know I said don't belittle your genre, but also don't belittle other books. I see that a lot where it's like, my book is so much better than this book, this book, and this book, and here's why. And maybe I know that author. Maybe I know the agent who worked on that book. Like, it's a very small industry. Don't do that.
And on the subject of comp titles, we often hear they need to be recent. They need to be obviously in the market that your book should sit in. But is that always the case? Or again, you referred earlier to sometimes the rules are broken. If there's a particularly good comp that is a classic or older or something, is it valid to use that sort of thing? Or films even and things like that?
So I think with comps, saying more about the comp and why it works for your book is more important than just like listing them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's nothing wrong with listing an older book. Like, oh, my book is perfect. My novel is perfect if you like classics like X and Y, because my book does this and that. So like, when someone tells me like, oh yeah, if you like classic romance novels by writers like Jane Austen, my book is perfect for you because it has a slow burn, or it has commentary on societal expectations. Like, explain to me why. And then use comp titles to talk about your voice at the same time. Like, my book is perfect if you like the voice found in novels by Sally Rooney, or books by like Adam Sass, like whoever the writer is you want to list there. I think older comps are only a problem when we think that comp is what your voice is going to be like. When someone tells me like, oh, my fantasy novel is perfect if you like, Tolkien and Terry Pratchett, and that's fine. But like, if that's what the voice is, it might not be fine, because like, I don't want to read 3 books about people walking someplace, like that's not going to work for me. So like, just be very specific with your comps and exact with your comps. So a good example of this is like, I like accessible science fiction. Like, I put that pretty much everywhere. And as a result, I get a lot of people who pitch me and they're like, oh, my accessible, funny science fiction novel is perfect for readers of Douglas Adams, right? I get that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Douglas Adams. Like, I don't think I don't think his books are super funny. Like, I don't get that kind of quirkiness. But I get the humor found in someone like John Scalzi, who's like a more modern sci-fi writer. And usually when I pass on a project that's like that, I'll say something like that, like, oh, like, if you're writing very quirky sci-fi that's like Douglas Adams, it's not going to work for me, but thank you for thinking of me. And the reply is almost always immediate, where they're like, oh no, it's nothing like a Douglas Adams book.
Did I say Douglas Adams?
And so that's bad. That's bad if you're using a comp like that when it doesn't match with what you're doing.
And so we've got the point now where you've got the query letters kind of got your interest. You like the sound of the book, the voice, etc. And you've read the opening pages, and the style seems good. What's your next step then? Do you request the whole book, or do you ask for more chapters first?
Yeah, I just ask for the whole book. Like, our agency, we ask for the first 10 pages, like pasted in the email, and then I usually ask for the whole book.
And what happens at that point? Do you then just basically sit down and read it and just hope that you like the book?
Yeah, that's it. Just sit down and read it. That's it. Like, I usually read it, like, I'll like read it on my office computer, and like, I know a book is something that I'm gonna want to work on when, like, after like chapter 3 or stuff, I start working on it. Like, I start like leaving notes on it. I'm like highlighting things like, oh, we would fix this. Oh, we would fix that if we work together. That way, by the time I email them and I'm like, hey, love the book. Here are a couple things I would do. Do you want to have a conversation? And then we have that talk.
I kind of wondered that because, writers, before they send it to agents, will spend so much time trying to get the text completely perfect, and it's always going to get seen by an editor and an agent, so it's always going to go through edits and stuff. So how much leeway do you know when you read something, you think, this isn't perfect, but how close to perfect does it need to be? I suppose it's the question.
So yeah, there are these two agents I like a lot. Eric Kane and Laura Zatz. They're at Headwater Literary, and when they talk about editing clients, they say that they edit to sell, right? And that's kind of the space I'm at when I'm reading something. Like, I can help a client polish up a couple chapters, and maybe, oh, this character arc isn't quite working, or, oh, we need to redo the ending here. But that's kind of like the extent of the editing that I can do. I can't really do developmental edits anymore. I used to be able to do that, but now I have a child, and then there's no time. Like, I have a very firm work-life balance where, like, I don't work after 5 o'clock. Day is over. So developmental edits are kind of impossible. So I do light edits and touch-ups and things like that. But like, when you send a book to me, and when you send a book to most agents, like, you should be like, you know what? If this was on the shelf right now, I would be comfortable with that. And that's the space you should be in when you're sending it off. Even though we'll have things to change, we will.
And one thing that authors that are going through the query process, often seem to get stuck on is the synopsis. So they might think, oh, I've written a good book, I've framed a nice query letter here, but summarizing all of that into 500 words or whatever is a nightmare. I mean, how important is that in the process? Is that a sort of last check, or does it not even matter that much for you?
I don't think the synopsis matters that much. I never ask for one. Like, the only time I ask for a synopsis is if the book is very long. Like, if I get pitched like a 100,000-word book and I request it, which very rarely happens, but if I do, like, I ask for a synopsis because that's a big time investment, and I need to know what's going to happen here. Sometimes if I request a book and I feel like it's going to have a too sad of an ending, or something weird might happen, I'll ask. Like, basically, an agent, in my opinion, and an editor usually asks for a synopsis to find out if there's something fundamentally wrong with the book, right? Like, I ask for a synopsis when I'm worried the ending is just gonna mess everything up. Like, I get to the end of the book and it's like, surprise, everyone's a ghost, or like, surprise, it was all a dream. Like, I don't want to read that, like, ever. So that's usually why I ask for that. And most synopsises that I get, like, are usually like 2 pages long. So, like, don't feel like you have to have it be like exactly a page, because sometimes you can't explain a whole book in a page. Like, I work on a lot of fantasy and sci-fi books, and like, the idea of describing them in a page feels kind of impossible.
And when it comes to your job, you're obviously got a lot of relationships with editors and publishers, and is that a really crucial part of your role, to have these relationships that you can then, you know how to pitch or how to speak to someone rather than email, etc.?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like, a big part of what an agent does is we have those conversations with editors. We get on the phone, we go grab coffee, and we get to know, like, who they are as people, and like what it is they're really into. That way we're not just what is that term? Like, throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like, you don't want to just like guess, So usually when I have a new project and it's in like a space I'm not super familiar with, I end up sending a lot of brain pick emails. I'm like, hey, what are you looking for? What is your list like? And that's how you get to know people. I have a few editors. Oh goodness. So there's an imprint at Harlequin called Mira, and I have 8 books with one editor there.
Wow.
And that's a result of building that relationship and getting to know them, and really understanding what they're into and what their tastes are like. I had an editor at Albert Whitman who I had 3 books with, and I'm just like looking at my bookshelves right now. There's an editor at Soho Teen who I had 4 books with. So, like, you build these relationships, you get to know them, and you end up just doing book after book.
And is a pitch So obviously authors are effectively pitching to you in their query letters, but when you're sort of doing that with at your stage of the process to editors, does it change at all? Like, are you more focused on the market, where this could sit on the shelf and things like that?
Yeah, they change a little bit. Like the pitch that I send to editors, sometimes I just reword the query letters that I get, and I work on them with my author to make sure it feels like it's representing them correctly. But then yeah, in the manuscript, I usually have these like bonus pages where I talk about like, here's why this book would exist in the market. Here's why, here's the media trends that are following this particular nonfiction project, or here are some examples of why this author is a star on the rise. The kind of stuff that a writer wouldn't necessarily have in their pitch letter to an agent. That's the kind of stuff that I bring to the editors. Because really, what you're doing, like when you think about an editor saying yes to a book, it's not just the editor, it's the sales team, it's the publicity team, it's all these people that are in the room. So as an agent, you have to give them as much ammunition as you can. You have to tell them like, here's all the media stuff, here's the publicity stuff, here's why this book will be easy for everybody, and that helps get it through.
And are those views that you think the author should also be having in their mind as well, when they are thinking about the market and what their title is and where it would sit and how much of a chance it has?
Not really. I think an author's job is just to write the book. That's it. Write the best story you can. Be aware of the market and what's on bookshelves, right? Like sometimes I think authors here be aware of the market and they get scared. They're like, well, how do I do that? You go to the bookstore. That's it. That's being aware of the market and what's out there. Because chances are you can't know about what's new and what's selling unless you're subscribing to all the different publishing specific newsletters to get to know all that stuff. But that gets overwhelming. That's not your job. Your job is to write your best book. Yeah, that's it.
And at the stage where so you've successfully pitched to the editor, the publisher is going to take it forward. Obviously, the contract thing comes into it. And do you get, how involved in the contract negotiations do you get?
Oh, very, very. That's a huge part of the agent job, right? We dig into the contracts. Chances are your agency will have what's known as a boilerplate, where they have a contract that this is all the stuff that we need to see to make this book go forward. We've established this with past authors, with this particular publisher, with this particular corporation. It's what we want. And more often than not, the publisher gives you that stuff because you've set that precedent, and it makes things move along a lot faster. And that's when you start to negotiate things like advances and sub rights. Like I want to keep foreign rights, I want to keep audio rights, I want to keep film and TV rights, which you're going to keep anyway because publishers don't know what to do with that. Sometimes they try to keep them. That happens, and it's your agent's job to say no. And and then we some contracts take a couple days, some take half a year. It all varies.
And is that as a result of the publishers, or are some authors very strict about what they're wanting out of this?
It's usually the result of the publishers.
Right.
I've never had an author who had a contract get held up because they didn't like a term here or there, right? Like usually the authors trust their agents and the agency.
And when you look at your overall list and the number of clients that you have, do you kind of do you ever get worried that you maybe have too many, that you spread yourself too thin? Is there an ideal number that you would like to keep it at, or is it just a case of you'll find the time?
Yeah, I'll find the time. I never really feel like that. I feel like my list is like half fiction, half nonfiction. And, a lot of nonfiction writers, they write a book every couple of years, or they're not regularly churning them out, all the research and all that stuff that has to go into them. And, a lot of my authors, they're, in terms of fiction, some of them are a book a year person, some of them are a book every 2 years kind of person. I never really feel like I'm juggling too much, which is always good.
And with your authors, do they, when they're thinking on their next book and stuff, presumably they'll have conversations with you about their possible paths that they want to take, and as again, part of your role, I guess, is to talk that through with them and see what maybe the best plan is. Is that
Oh
right?
yeah. Agents, authors should always fire their new book idea by their agent, just to get a sense of, is it something they want to work on? Because they might not like the idea. And if they don't like the idea, then that's an opportunity to talk about why it might not be a good idea, or what their next idea could be. I had some of those conversations today with some clients where they fired a couple of new ideas my way. Some were good, some weren't. That's perfectly normal. And then, you might not agree with your agent. You might be like, oh no, this is my next book. And then you go find another agent. And that's a normal thing.
Yeah. And you touched on it at the start that you also write yourself. You mentioned that yourself. And your latest, I think there's a poster for it in the back there, the Jagged Little Pill, which is a collaboration with Alanis Morissette. How did that particular collaboration come about, and what's the book about?
Yeah, so that one, I wish it was more of a glamorous story, because like when I tell my family and friends, they're like, "Oh my god!" and like I bring up Diablo Cody, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, she has an Oscar! How did that happen?" And like the very unglamorous story is that like I'm on social media, I talk a lot about the kind of books I want to see more of, and I was talking about how I wanted more stories about adopted kids, and I was like, oh, I need to write more. I'm adopted, so like I should be doing more in that space. And an editor over at Abrams, who follows me on Twitter, Maggie, was like, hey, like I know you're looking to write more adoptee stories. We have this IP project. The creators want an adopted person to work on the story. Can we hop on the phone and talk about it? I was like, oh my God, yes. Hop on the phone. Fully expecting it's actually Star Wars, because that's usually what that phone call is, where they can't talk about it in an email. It's usually Star Wars, or it's Marvel, or just something very hush hush. But it was something else that was hush hush. It was this Jagged Little Pill, the Broadway musical book, which I was just as excited about. I was like freaking out about it. So they sent sample pages that I'd done from some of my other books to Alanis and to Diablo to see what they thought, and they liked my writing. They picked me to do the book, and that was it. And it was just a year of a lot of emails with famous people. Again, it was one of those things where my friends and family were like, "Are you flying out to LA? What's going on?" I'm like, "No, I'm in my office like a normal person. Not as fancy as people think." And then the book is an adaptation of the stage musical, which is inspired by Alanis's music, and it's about the musical has adults in it. The YA adaptation focuses on the teenage characters from the musical. It's about these 5 kids whose lives all collide as a result of one of them getting sexually assaulted at a high school party. And how all their relationships and their family relationships all kind of fracture under all this pressure to figure out whether or not they should do something. The answer is obviously yes, you should do something, and the whole book is about the importance of raising your voice and being an ally and sticking up for one another, even when things in your personal life, like your relationships or your family, are kind of a hot mess, which is what happens in the book.
And when how do you the kind of intersection between your writing and your agenting, that's a lot to juggle, and especially you're kind of working both sides of it, aren't you? How do you try to avoid representing something that's too close to what you write? Do you keep a kind of like a wall between that two parts of yourself?
Yeah, so I do work on a lot of YA books. So, and I haven't quite fallen into that hole yet, where someone pitches me something that's too close to what I'm doing. I have gotten a few YA novels that are like my one book, Don't Read the Comments, is about like video games and online harassment and stuff. And I've gotten a couple of books that felt a little too close to that. And I've said in emails like, this sounds great, but I kind of wrote a book like this, and it's kind of weird to represent something like that. So I've never quite gotten into that messy spot. I guess in terms of juggling it, I just quoted this yesterday to a couple of friends, but so Nora Roberts, there's this quote from her, and I'm going to mess it up, but she talks about how in the writing life, when you're juggling a whole bunch of things, and in your personal life and just everything, there's a moment where you have to realize some of the balls that you're juggling, some of them are glass, and some of them are made of plastic. It's okay to drop the plastic ones, right? When it comes to all the juggling that I do, like my writing life, my books and stuff, those are the plastic ones. Like I have a day job where a bunch of writers are counting on me, and I have a family at home that is counting on me. So like, as much as I like writing my own books, that's the plastic in the juggling match. The glass are all my clients who are counting on me to handle their careers and get them the book deals to provide for their families. So that's kind of how I do it. I just, man, I'm adopted and my family is Irish Catholic. So it's the Irish Catholic guilt right there, where I'm just like, I don't matter. I gotta take care of my family. Like, that's turning into my dad.
That's a good analogy. I like that plastic and glass balls you're juggling. I'm going to use that at some point.
And so, if we could sort of sum up, I guess, what if someone's going through the query process right now, what sort of general advice would you give them at the moment? Because I know it seems, especially after the pandemic and everything, it's very tough at the moment out there to try to find representation.
Yeah, I would just tell them to be like a little more patient than they would have been in the past. Like, you have to be patient anyway, because publishing is just this big waiting game all the time. Right now I have a lot of colleagues who are, they're working at home with like 2 or 3 kids, or their spouse like can't be at home, and so they have to be at home, so they're only working at nights. Like, it's a weird time right now, even for people who are in the industry, like editors who are working at home and doing the same thing. So it's a little bit more waiting than I think people used to have to deal with. So just be a little more patient, I guess. I think that's really all. Focus on what you can control in your writer life, and that's your books. That's what you're working on. That's what you're writing. It's the connections that you're making. It's the friends you're making in the industry. And then just wait. I guess it sucks. I hate it, but yeah.
I know. Yeah.
What's your views on nudges? Is there a period of time where it's okay for an author to nudge to say, can I just check in what's going on with my application?
I am a big nudge fan. I think it's fine. Like, nothing bad ever happens, right, from nudging. Like, nothing, right? Like I feel like the only time something bad happening from nudging would be if you were like doing it every day, right? Then I'd be like, this isn't someone I want to work with, right? Because like that would be bad. But if an agency says, we'll get back to you with 6 to 8 weeks, and you hit 8 weeks, there's nothing wrong with sending an email that's like, hey, like, I just want to see if you got this query, like if you're interested or not. You might not hear back. If you don't hear back, that just means it's not for them, and that's okay. If it's a full manuscript that they've requested, send a nudge at the end of those 8 weeks and see what's going on. They'll reply to the nudges. Like, agents nudge editors all day, like all day. So it's okay to nudge them. And if they don't respond, that probably means it's a pass, and that's okay. Just go on to the next person.
Excellent. And what's your own writing? What are you working on just now?
Yeah, so I'm still promoting Jagged Little Pill. It came out last month, which is wild to think about. And my next book, it's called With or Without You. It comes out next year. It's about 2 teenagers who work in rival cheesesteak trucks in Philadelphia. And like, rival cheesesteak stuff is a thing here in Philly. So it's been a lot of fun to write and dig into. So that'll be out in the fall next year.
Cool. Excellent. That sounds awesome. Yeah, I like that.
Well, those were the main questions we had for you, but we always end every podcast by asking our guests the same questions. The first of which is, what was the last book that you read that you're able to talk about?
Last book I read, I'm like, what book? Like, does it exist right now?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I had just picked up. Oh my God, why is it escaping me? It's like on my nightstand right now. Oh no.
It's awful. Whenever you put on the spot, your mind just goes blank.
It's okay. It's okay. I know it's just like sitting there. Oh my God. I'm like picturing the cover in my head. Oh well, maybe it'll come to me later.
It'll come, yeah, maybe. Move on to the next
then,
question, Tarek.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll jump on to what was the last film that you watched.
Well, I've also been reading, like in terms of middle grade books, I started reading The Marvelers by Danielle Clayton.
Oh yeah.
And Witchlings by Claribel Ortega, which have been really, really fun. My son is not old enough for those books yet. He's 4, but I've been like slowly piling up like a middle grade library in my house. Yeah. So like, when he's old enough, I can just be like, surprise, these are all of Dad's friends. And he won't be impressed because kids are never impressed with that. But at least I'll get to say it.
Nice. Yeah. What about the last film that you watched?
Ooh, the last film. I feel like, is it an embarrassing one? Oh no. I just watched The Lost City.
Oh, is it good?
Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum, which is just so much fun. Oh my God.
Like a kind of Romancing the Stone type.
Yeah. It's like the author is out on an adventure with her cover model. It's so funny. But before that, which is why I was like, oh, is it something embarrassing? It's because I watched Morbius, the
right, okay. Is it as bad as people say?
You know what? I don't think it was as terrible as everyone was saying. Like, I had fun, you know, it wasn't good, but like, you know, it was like the Venom movie, right? I had a good time, wasn't great. It looked like the main character was wrestling like a black garbage bag in the entire movie. But Morbius, it was fun. It was super predictable, but it was fun.
It's funny, the Venom films, the first one especially, I remember thinking it felt very much like the kind of comic book movie you'd get like in the 90s. Like it felt like a really old-fashioned type of comic book film.
Exactly, yes.
And okay, what about the last TV show you watched or are watching?
So right now my wife and I are watching Severance on Apple.
Brilliant.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Really good. We're like 4 episodes in, and I think it speaks to how good the show is, because like my wife is like a big reality TV person. Like she doesn't really watch like scripted television, and she's like super into it. So that's a really good sign. So yeah.
I love that show.
It's very much like what the hell is going on, but you keep wanting to watch it and find out. So no, it's great.
Well, that's the very, very last thing we always do is a super quick fire either or, and I always say there's no right answer apart from one. But we'll start off with Stand By Me or Kings of Summer.
Stand By Me.
Nice.
Classic. TV or cinema?
Maybe TV. Yeah.
Night owl or early bird?
Oh, night owl. I stay up very late.
Fancy restaurant or takeaway?
Takeaway.
Nice. Last one, real book or ebook?
Oh, real book.
Incorrect answer, I'm afraid. That's what
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is at UK Page 1, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.